You don't always notice when it starts. A little stiffness in the morning, a deeper sigh when standing from the couch, the way your fingers linger just a second longer on the kitchen counter for balance. It's subtle at first, so quiet that it almost feels like nothing. And maybe it is nothing, or maybe it's the body whispering before it has to shout. You're eating the way you always have. You buy the right foods, you skip the fried stuff, you trust the familiar labels. You drizzle that golden oil over your vegetables, that same bottle that says heart healthy on the front. You've done this for years. Why would anything change? But something has changed, not all at once. You feel it before you see it. Maybe it's in the blood test that doesn't match your effort, or the way your energy dips in the afternoon, like a curtain falling too soon. Maybe it's the way your heart races after a meal that used to feel light. These are not signs of failure. They are signs of a body adapting, quietly, constantly, and sometimes inconveniently. Because the truth is, what worked for you at 40 doesn't always work the same at 70. The foods that once nourished may now need a second look, not because you made a mistake, but because your body is evolving, slowly, gracefully, but unavoidably. And what slips through that evolution, what rides unnoticed in the oils you trust, is not just flavor, but chemistry. The kind that warms your pan quickly, coats your food cleanly, but lingers in your arteries longer than you might think. This isn't a warning, it's a turning point. One of those moments where a whisper deserves your attention before it becomes something louder. You stayed on the path. You said no to the things everyone warned you about. Fast food, processed snacks, heavy sauces. You leaned into the fresh, the simple, the grilled. You bought the extra virgin, the non-GMO, the bottles with leaves and hearts printed on the front. You listened and you followed. So when the results didn't match the discipline, when your numbers crept up, or your ankles stayed swollen, or the fog in your head thickened despite your clean plate, it didn't make sense. It almost felt like betrayal, like your own body had stopped playing fair. But fairness isn't part of the equation when the rules have shifted. The ingredients haven't changed much, but you have. And so has the way your body processes what you give it. That same drizzle of oil over roasted vegetables, that same pan-seared chicken breast, what once moved cleanly through your system now has a different conversation with your blood. The lines of inflammation aren't always sharp. They blur over time, like water stains spreading under the surface, unseen until they begin to touch everything. And that's what no one told you, that aging doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you absorb, how you filter, how you recover. The clean meal might still look right on your plate, but inside, it's no longer a perfect fit. Not because it's wrong, but because it was built for a body that lived 2 decades ago. The older body still knows how to thrive. It just speaks a softer language now, one that doesn't respond to loud marketing or bright packaging. It responds to balance, to calm, to the absence of what quietly inflames. So when clean eating stops working, it's not a signal to give up, it's an invitation to look closer. And when you do look closer, you realize it's not the food itself that changed. It's what snuck into it when no one was watching. Not a villain in the obvious sense. Not sugar, not salt, not something with a warning label. Just an oil. Simple, golden, labeled with promises. You've seen it 100 times. You probably bought it last week, maybe even this morning. Vegetable oil. Or its cousins. Soybean, canola, sunflower, safflower, corn. Names that sound clean, familiar, even gentle. They slip into your kitchen through bottles, yes, but also through jars and packages and boxes marked low fat, baked, not fried. Smart choice. It's not just what you cook with, it's what your food is cooked in before it ever reaches you. You don't notice it because it's everywhere. The stir-fry sauce, the canned tuna, the so-called healthy salad dressing you found in the natural section. It's in the granola, the crackers, the frozen veggie patties you bought for quick dinners. Even when you think you've cut back, it waits for you in the default choices. Because somewhere along the way, this oil became the standard. Not because it was the best for the body, but because it was cheap, shelf-stable, and easy to mass-produce. That's what made it normal. Not nourishment, not wisdom, just convenience and cost. And when something becomes normal, it becomes invisible. You don't question it. You don't expect it to cause harm. You trust that if it were truly dangerous, someone would have said something. But that's the thing about slow damage. It doesn't raise alarms. It builds quietly, cell by cell, year by year, under the radar of daily life, until normal doesn't feel so normal anymore, until the body starts whispering again, telling you that what's common isn't always harmless. Because the oils themselves aren't always the enemy, it's the relationship that's changed. The way your body once broke them down with quiet efficiency now feels more like a negotiation. At 30, your cells handled fats with grace. Enzymes moved swiftly, blood vessels stayed supple, and inflammation settled quickly, like a storm that passed overnight. But now, the storm lingers. The enzymes arrive slower. The repair work takes longer. What once nourished now sometimes lingers too long, metabolized in ways that weren't a problem before, but now leave residue behind. This isn't decay, it's adaptation. The liver doesn't process omega-6 oils with the same easy rhythm. The gut, more sensitive with age, starts to resist the oxidative load. The lining of your blood vessels, once elastic and forgiving, now tenses more easily under the weight of invisible inflammation. And so that seemingly light drizzle of oil, the one that made your food glide across the pan, becomes something heavier inside. Not instantly, not dramatically, just persistently. And that persistence is the danger, because it doesn't feel like poison. It feels like habit, like routine, like comfort. But inside, the balance tips, the protective fats, the ones that once kept cell walls strong and hormones stable, get outnumbered. And the fats that encourage stiffness, swelling, and stress begin to crowd the space. Not all fats, not all oils, just the ones we've come to rely on without questioning. The ones that your aging body no longer tolerates the way it used to. You didn't stop taking care of yourself. You didn't let yourself go. You've been listening, following, trusting, but now your body is speaking a new dialect. And the message is simple. If you're willing to hear it, it's not just what you eat, it's what you absorb, what you hold, and what you can still let go. It's easy to believe it's harmless. The label says cholesterol-free. It pours like silk. It doesn't smoke at low heat. It even has a little green leaf printed on the front, as if to whisper, I'm the better choice. And for a time, we believed it, because we wanted to. We needed something easy, something affordable, something that fit into a health-conscious life without requiring a complete overhaul. So we reached for the canola, the corn, the soybean. We trusted that light meant healthy, that vegetable meant natural. But what was left off the label spoke louder than what was printed on it. Because these oils aren't pressed gently from olives or churned from cream. They're extracted through chemical solvents, bleached, deodorized, and heated at high temperatures that change their very structure. The result isn't just oil. It's a reactive substance prone to oxidation that floods your system with an imbalance of fats your body cannot use well, especially not now. Not when your cells are more sensitive. Not when your defenses are slower to rebuild. That bottle you trusted might not taste heavy, but inside it stirs something thick and lingering. It doesn't leave the same clean trace as it once did. Instead, it clings to the lining of your arteries, fuels tiny fires in your tissues, and encourages cholesterol to behave in ways that make it harder for blood to move freely. Not because you use too much, but because your body no longer filters it the same way. And still, no alarm bells, just subtle changes, energy that doesn't return, swelling that holds longer, meals that feel more taxing than nourishing. The oil may be light in color, but its weight is carried quietly in your blood, and eventually in the narrowing of your path forward. It doesn't happen overnight. The body is far too patient for that. It gives you time, years, sometimes decades, before the damage becomes visible. But all the while, it's adjusting, making room, compensating. Your arteries, once open like quiet highways, begin to narrow, not with panic, but with slow accumulation. A thin coating here, a soft ridge there, not blockages yet, just a quiet constriction, like someone slowly turning down the dial on your circulation without telling you. You might not feel it right away, or if you do, it won't scream. It will whisper through the afternoon slump you blame on aging, through the heaviness in your legs when you climb the stairs, through the moments your heart works just a little harder than it used to, even though you've changed nothing. These oils, processed, overheated, and out of balance, don't just float through your system. They embed. They lodge themselves in the walls of your vessels, changing the way your blood flows, the way oxygen reaches your muscles, the way your heart feels after an ordinary walk around the block. And what starts as a coating can harden. What begins as inflammation can become scarring. and what once was a flexible, living tunnel becomes something less forgiving. It's not your fault. It's the price of a system doing its best with inputs it was never built to handle in such quantities over such long stretches of time. But even here, with the arteries drawing in and the blood moving slower, the body is still trying, still fighting for balance, still repairing between the lines. It hasn't given up on you, not for a second, which means you don't have to give up on it. Not now, especially not when the cause has a name and the shift begins with noticing. Because the damage doesn't always declare itself with pain. It moves in silence, slipping beneath your awareness, masked as the ordinary inconveniences of age. A little more swelling in the ankles, a little less clarity in the morning. That moment you walk into a room and forget why, or the way your knees feel heavier, even though you've walked that hallway 1,000 times before. These aren't dramatic symptoms. They don't send you rushing to the doctor. They're easy to dismiss, easy to normalize. But they're the body's way of speaking, gently, almost politely, before it raises its voice. This is how inflammatory fats operate, not with fireworks but with fog. They accumulate in tissues that should glide, in joints that should bend, in vessels that should open. And the result isn't a crisis, it's a dulling of movement, of clarity, of energy. And if you've noticed that the joy you used to feel in the late afternoons is harder to find, or that the lightness that used to follow a walk is now replaced with a strange fatigue, you're not imagining it. You're sensing the undercurrent, the whisper. Because your body still knows, even when your habits haven't changed, even when your calendar says it's just another Tuesday, your biology is tracking every bite, every oil, every signal, and it's adapting as best it can to the quiet intrusion of something it doesn't need, but has grown used to. That's the risk of these fats. Not that they break things all at once, but that they settle in so smoothly, we stop noticing the sharpness of our decline. Not because we're careless, but because the fall is padded, gentle, until one day we look back and wonder how we got so far from where we started. And maybe that's the hardest part to admit. Not that you were wrong, but that what once served you no longer does. You didn't choose poorly. You followed what made sense. You trusted doctors, labels, articles. You listened when they said fat was dangerous, that oils from vegetables were modern and pure, that margarine was smarter than butter, that the future of health was lean and light and nearly fat-free. You made the switch. You cleared out the pantry. You swapped the old for the new. You did everything right. And for a while it seemed to work. Your cholesterol went down. Your meals felt cleaner. Your kitchen smelled less heavy. You believed you were giving your body a gift. And you were, because you were trying, because you cared, because you didn't wait for sickness to make you pay attention. You were already paying attention, and that still matters. But the body you were feeding then is not the body you live in now. That body could keep up with the imbalance. It could absorb the new oils and buffer the inflammation and recover from the free radicals left behind. It could bend without swelling, sleep without interruption, think without static. It had margin. This one doesn't. Not because it's weaker, but because it's wiser and less tolerant of noise. And those oils, those fats, those invisible intruders, they're noisy now. The same advice that once aligned with your life may now lead you away from health, not toward it. Not because the rules changed, but because your body did. So this isn't about blame, it's about permission. Permission to reevaluate, to shift again, to say, I trusted that once, but now I trust my body more. And that trust, even late in the game, can still turn the story. So you start to look again, not at the big indulgences, but at the quiet conveniences. The frozen veggie mix you saute on busy nights. The dressing that promises omega-3s in bold letters, but lists soybean oil before it lists vinegar. The gluten-free crackers you keep on hand for light snacking. The rotisserie chicken from the grocery store that feels like a time saver. These aren't junk food. They're everyday food. Reasonable choices. The kind of things anyone who's trying to eat well might rely on. But when you turn them over in your hand, when you read the back instead of the front, you see it, always there, usually first, the oils. They show up in the spaces you stopped questioning, not because you weren't paying attention, but because life asked for shortcuts, because cooking every meal from scratch takes more energy than some days allow. And that's fair. No one faults you for making things easier, but easier came with a trade. And now, your joints carry it. Your blood remembers it. Your tissues hold it, like a debt that was never supposed to accumulate but did, little by little, bite by bite. Because convenience has a cost, not just in dollars, but in silence, the kind of health debt that accrues quietly, invisibly, while you're trying your best to stay ahead. It's not a punishment, it's a side effect of a food system built around shelf life instead of soul, around speed instead of stability. But even now, with those oils hiding in plain sight, the solution doesn't have to be drastic. It begins, as always, with awareness, with noticing, with the quiet decision to reclaim what you trusted others to choose for you, because you still get to choose. And the body, despite everything, still responds when you do. Because beneath all the symptoms, all the changes, all the numbers on lab reports that crept up despite your effort, there's a pattern. A quiet flame that burns not bright, but constant. It doesn't announce itself with fever or sudden pain. It simmers, low-grade inflammation, the kind that builds when your body stays in defense mode too long, not from illness, but from irritation, from imbalance, from the steady drip of oils your system doesn't know how to make peace with anymore. You don't feel it as a burn, you feel it as heaviness, as swelling that takes longer to go down, as fog in the mind that used to be sharp, as stiffness that settles in joints that once carried you easily through the day. And it's not just where you feel it, it's how it shows up everywhere at once, in your mood, in your sleep, in your blood pressure, in how long it takes to heal from the simplest bruise. These oils, rich in omega-6 fats, stripped of balance, don't just build cholesterol. They shift your internal chemistry toward stress, toward reactivity, toward slow systemic fire. And your aging body, wise and worn, doesn't buffer that fire the way it used to. It holds onto it, stores it, until you notice that you're no longer bouncing back the way you once did. But here's the part you might not know. Inflammation is reversible, not in one day, but in rhythm, in patterns, in the small daily choices that soothe instead of spike, that cool the fire instead of feeding it. Removing these oils isn't about restriction, it's about relief, not just for your arteries, but for your entire system, because the body, even now, is waiting for quiet, for balance, for you to give it less noise and more peace. And that peace isn't just for the body, it's for your mind too, because the brain, more than any other organ, is built from fat. Its cells float in it, signal through it, depend on its balance to stay clear and connected. When that balance tilts, when the delicate ratio between calming and inflammatory fats breaks, your thoughts can suffer long before your test results do. It starts subtly. A name just out of reach. A room entered without purpose. A sentence you begin but lose halfway through. You write it off. Everyone forgets things. But beneath those lapses, something deeper is shifting. These industrial oils, rich in omega-6 and stripped of their natural companions, push your brain into a slow fog. They disrupt the membrane fluidity your neurons need to fire smoothly. They provoke microinflammation, not enough to call a disease, but enough to dull the edges of your clarity, enough to change how you feel in your own mind. And when your brain loses that smoothness, your mood can follow. More irritability, less joy, emotions that hang heavier than they used to. It's not aging, not entirely. It's chemical, it's dietary, it's environmental, and most of all, it's fixable. Because the moment you begin removing those oils, your brain begins to thank you. The fog doesn't lift all at once, but it starts to thin. Sleep deepens, words return. You remember what rested used to feel like. And it's not because you took a pill or started a new supplement. It's because you gave your brain the fat it was built to run on and let go of what had been clouding it for years. Clarity isn't gone. It's just been waiting, right behind the meals that felt fine, but never truly nourished. Because when the fog starts to lift, so does everything else. What was sticky becomes smooth again. Not overnight, but gradually, unmistakably. Your blood, once thick with the silent byproducts of inflammation, begins to flow more freely. Your vessels, no longer under constant internal strain, start to soften. You feel it first not in the mirror, but in the morning, when your hands don't ache before you move them, when your walk to the mailbox doesn't steal your breath, when you rise from a chair and your knees don't protest as loudly. These are the early signs, the proof that less friction inside brings more freedom outside. Because once those oils are removed, those invisible irritants that coated your meals and clouded your chemistry, the repair begins. Your blood becomes less reactive. The The clots that once formed too quickly begin to slow. The inflammation that whispered through your arteries starts to quiet. Oxygen reaches your muscles without struggle, and energy, real energy, not a caffeine spike or a sugar rush, returns in waves that feel like yourself again. And it's not because of a cleanse or a crash diet or some magic tonic. It's because you took out what didn't belong. You gave your body less to fight. And that space, the absence of harm, is where healing begins. Quietly, constantly, exactly the way the damage once arrived. This is where the turning happens, not in a moment, but in momentum. You start to crave the feeling of clarity more than the convenience of packaging. You begin to trust the foods that don't shout promises but offer peace. And your body, in return, begins to move as if the weight it carried wasn't yours to begin with. Because maybe it never was. Maybe it was just the residue of choices made without knowing. Until now, you don't need to overhaul your life. You don't need to start from zero or throw out every recipe you've ever loved. Change doesn't have to be loud to be lasting. It starts small. You swap the bottle on your stove. The plastic jug with a long shelf life becomes a dark glass bottle of olive oil, rich, smooth, and made from fruit, not seed. You find ghee or grass-fed butter and remember what food used to smell like before everything was engineered to be neutral. You trade out a jar of mayonnaise laced with soybean oil for one made with avocado oil, or better yet, you try making your own. And the beauty of it is that your meals don't become harder, they become simpler. One pan, one good fat, real salt, maybe a squeeze of lemon or a pinch of herbs. Suddenly, flavor returns. Not the kind built in labs, but the kind you haven't tasted in years because oils muted it. You notice that roasted vegetables crisp better, that your eggs don't leave a strange aftertaste, that your stomach doesn't feel tight after dinner. And it doesn't stop in the kitchen. You find it in your energy after the meal, in how your legs feel when you get up to water the plants, in how your mind moves more freely during conversations. These aren't miracles. They're the natural result of the body no longer being asked to fight its own fuel. Each switch is quiet, but together they become a signal that you're listening now, that you're not waiting for permission to feel better. You're giving it to yourself, one recipe, one oil, one small meaningful act at a time. Because you don't have to start over. You just have to start paying attention to what your body still welcomes. And maybe the most surprising thing is how quickly your body responds. Not with fanfare, not with instant perfection, but with a kind of quiet gratitude. As if it's been waiting all this time for you to notice. Because even after decades of processed oils, conflicting advice, and silent inflammation, your body is still listening, still adjusting, still doing what it was designed to do, protect you, carry you, recover, when given the chance. You don't need to punish it to make progress. You don't need to treat it like a machine in need of discipline. What it's asking for isn't control, it's care. The kind of care that doesn't come from shame, but from understanding. And when you offer that, when you stop fighting your own biology and start feeding it what it recognizes, the shift is almost immediate. Not just in how you feel, but in how you relate to yourself. The fear softens, the frustration loosens its grip, because you realize the struggle wasn't because you were failing. It was because your body was trying to succeed under conditions it was never meant to endure. It didn't give up on you, it adapted, and now you're adapting back. That ache in your joints, it can ease. That fog in your thoughts, it can lift. That tightness in your chest, the stiffness in your steps, the confusion after meals, it can all begin to change. Not because you've discovered something new, but because you've returned to something true. To fats that heal, not harm. To foods that comfort without consequence. And with every small improvement, every ounce of energy that returns, the message becomes clear. Your body was never broken. It was just overwhelmed. And now it's breathing again, listening, responding, just waiting for you to keep going. There's a moment when you realize the path forward isn't about fighting anymore. It's not about battling age or chasing youth. It's not about making up for lost time or punishing yourself for what you didn't know. It's about choosing what feels right now, what brings ease, not effort, clarity, not confusion. And when you look at that bottle of vegetable oil, something so ordinary, so long trusted, you don't see a necessity anymore. You see a choice, one you no longer need to make, Because now you know that health isn't just about avoiding illness. It's about alignment, about giving your body what it recognizes, what it remembers. When you switch to real fats, olive oil, coconut, ghee, butter, you're not just changing ingredients. You're changing the conversation your food has with your cells. You're telling your body, I hear you, I see you, I'm on your side. And the body responds. Even in your 60s, your 70s, your 80s, it responds. The inflammation begins to retreat. The blood moves easier. The mind clears. You sleep deeper. You rise lighter. You eat and feel fed, not just full. And something else happens too. Trust returns. Not in a system or a slogan, but in yourself. In your own ability to choose better, not because you're afraid, but because you finally understand what better means. Let that be the legacy of this shift. Not fear of the oils you leave behind, but joy in the life you build ahead. A life where food is simple again, where meals are made with intention, where clarity lives in your joints, your thoughts, your mornings. This isn't about perfect eating, it's about peaceful eating, about letting the light back in, not just into your kitchen, but into your arteries, your energy, your days, because your body isn't closing in, it's opening, responding, relearning what it's like to thrive. And maybe the most powerful truth is this: you didn't miss your window. You're still in it, right now. And every drop of healing starts with the oils you no longer need, and the life you're still fully able to nourish.